I do really want to talk about this murder of a Turkish-American young woman, 26 years old, named Aysenur Ezgi, and she was, again, much like Rachel Corrie was in the year 2003 when she was working with the International Solidarity Movement, which is an international organization that takes people to the West Bank, specifically in to effectively defend communities that have been facing either and both IDF violence or settler violence, to try to get people to move, to make it intolerable for them to live in their villages. And Rachel Corrie was killed while standing in front of someone's home wearing a bright orange vest with a bullhorn, and she was crushed by a bulldozer that went to go demolish a home. And at the time, we all took the streets, and here we are, whatever, 20 years later, and here's another American activist who went with ISM to bear witness in the village of Beta. Beta has been under a lot of violence and attacks from settlers there, and 15 people had been killed in Beta prior to this event. But according to the Washington Post, did an incredible deep dive into what happened to her. And they spoke to 13 witnesses and reviewed 50 videos and photos. She was at this protest. She didn't want to get too close to the action. We've all done the protests there where we're like, I don't want to get arrested now. I don't want to, let's stay back. So she kept her distance from this nonviolent protest. Well, it turned out to be some rock throwing and whatnot. Of course, the IDF escalates it with tear gas. Her Australian colleague testified to say, or told the media, that she was, away from the action. 20 minutes after basically like the protest died down, she shot and killed. She was hiding by a tree, again, trying to keep clear. She was shot and killed specifically. And there's more sort of details about, hang on. There's more details from one of the colleagues, an Israeli activist named Jonathan Pollock.
These were two separate shots of live ammunition, shot one after the other. The first one hit a metal object, and then a young man from the village in his thigh. And then I heard another shot. And then I heard people calling my name in English, saying, we need help, come help us. I ran over there about 10 or 15 meters behind me, farther away from the soldiers, into the olive groves. I found her lying on the ground beside the tree, bleeding from her head. I put my hand under her head to try and stop the bleeding. I took her pulse. She had a very weak pulse. We called the ambulance. From there, we evacuated her to the village's medical center, where the doctor came into the ambulance and continued to the hospital, where they tried to resuscitate her, but failed.
So, again, she was from Seattle. She was born in Turkey, but she grew up in Seattle. She'd been an activist. She was young, again, 26, and she had gone to Standing Rock, as you do when you're an organizer and an activist. And she wanted to go to the West Bank, bear witness to everything that had been happening. Since October 7th, 600 Palestinians in the West Bank have been killed. And then, again, more specifically about Beta, 15 Palestinians have been killed there. Last month, another American citizen who we haven't even talked about or haven't heard much about, Daniel Santiago, who was a 32-year-old teacher from New Jersey, was shot in the thigh by Israeli forces in the same olive grove where Eygi was killed. The IDF in Santiago said Santiago was accidentally injured when soldiers fired live rounds into the air to disperse protesters. They also claimed the same thing about Aysenur, that she was accidentally killed. But again, based on Jonathan's testimony and the WAPO investigation, that is not true at all. She was shot in the head. I mean, this is like, what a way to continue to galvanize an entire generation, Sarah, of young Americans who do not want to see our taxpayer dollars and any funds going to Israel. But you know, again, like with Rachel, like with now with Aysenur, it's like the tail. It's this. It repeats itself. Um, yeah, I guess I just wanted your thoughts to weigh in on this insanity.
Yeah. You know, the level of passive voice that the Biden administration uses when talking about Israel's killing of Aysenur is deeply offensive. Her family has called them out repeatedly. They have not been contacted by the Biden administration. Multiple witnesses say that they have not been contacted by Israel's supposed quote unquote self-investigation. Her family wants an independent investigation. That's absolutely falling on deaf ears. And there's even been some really gross sort of depictions of her, like making it seem like she wasn't a real American or wasn't a legitimate American, whatever that means. There was a New York Times article describing her funeral, and it said, there wasn't an American flag in sight. There were Turkish flags, but not American flags. And it's like, funny that they don't want to like fly the flag of the state that may have provided the munition that killed her, and that is not even reaching out to them in the most bare minimum way. But I think this also just draws on a deeper point, which is, she has not gotten enough attention, but she definitely got more than not that it's a competition. Every single human life snuffed out deserves to be remembered, deserves to be honored. So it's not a competition, but it's just to say this, what Israel is doing with U.S. participation has resulted in a staggering amount of deaths that we don't even totally know the final count. One study in the British medical journal, The Lancet, said that when you include indirect killings, the number could be as high as 186,000. We just really don't know. Official death counts are over 40,000 at this point, but we all know that those are like honestly skew conservative because there are deaths from famine, disease. There are bodies that still have not been retrieved from the rubble of buildings.
They're also so meticulously, like the Gaza Health Ministry, for all the naysaying that Biden participated in, that every single person counted is like identified by a loved one, and like most of their body parts are there. You know what I mean? So like, yeah, the Lancet study was like given like the body parts that cannot be identified, to say nothing of what you just said, the people trapped under the rubble. It's like, it's just amazing how much we have dehumanized and discredited Palestinians and any kind of Palestinian, official, to the point where it's like, oh no, there's a reason that the body count has stayed the same. It's because they are meticulous, and also they're running on no resources. Whatever. I don't have to, keep going. But I do want to say, like, it's not just, Aysenur, but I want to mention, and we didn't talk about this, but about a week ago, a man named Matt Nelson in the Boston area self-immolated over Palestine as well, following Aaron Bushnell and I believe an unidentified woman outside of the Atlanta area who also these are 3 self-immolations over Palestine. So again, this is a huge issue to Americans. It is not normal to be ingesting this amount of death and knowing that despite everything you're doing, somehow the government, it falls on deaf ears. And to your point, they did have this statement. Biden eventually came out with a statement saying that Eygi's death was unacceptable, and added that Israel's preliminary investigation has indicated it was a result of a tragic error, yes, resulting from an unnecessary escalation. And then Anthony Blinken, again, with his, like empty ass words, is asking for security forces to, quote, make fundamental changes in the way they operate in the West Bank. I mean, it's so egregious. And when you compare the Democrats and Republicans on this issue, Sarah, it does feel like there is little daylight. I guess the only thing I could say is Democrats give us maybe slightly more time. And I mean that in a way that, like, Donald Trump is very keen on supporting the full annexation of the West Bank as per, Sheldon Adelson's widow's wishes. But I do agree that this sort of like slow death, quick death that people talk about when it comes to Democrats or Republicans, that's absolutely apt in the issue of Palestine. But the allowing for more time for us to stop this death, I think is an advantage. A shitty one, but a small one. And I know that not everyone agrees with me. I know that's not like, a lot of folks listening, don't agree, but that's where I'm at.
It's a hard one. I will say that it's really unfortunate that Biden was the person who was president when this happened. Biden, his lifelong career, if you could identify one consistent thread, probably being extremely pro-Israel, is that. I mean, he was like defending Israel, breaking people's bones intentionally during the Intifada. He was calling in the late 90s for the U.S. to move its embassy to Jerusalem. He has supported, he supported Trump's. He said he wasn't going to reverse Trump's moving of the embassy to Jerusalem. I think, unfortunately, on this issue, I mean,
no one's more Zionist than Biden. Like,
like on this issue, it's hard to even use words like worst case scenario, but what we're in now is a very, very bad scenario. And like for we are seeing huge movements and huge opposition, and for Harris serves in the administration. Like, you hear people say like, oh, well, she can't break from a president who she's serving under. He's still sort of her boss. And it's like, no, that's just a thing you made up. Like, we're taught that genocide is the crime of crimes. You learn that. You learn words like never again. And now you have, scholars, experts saying this qualifies as a genocide. You have the ICJ saying that it's plausible genocide happening. And so for there to be sort of, for like decorum, professional decorum to sort of win the day in the face of what's happening is really unfortunate. So,
I think that's a really good point. And I think the other thing is like, we all thought that given that she has a campaign, like if there was one moment where you could distinguish yourself from the person you're serving under, it's when you're campaigning. I mean, she distinguishes herself, like I said, every day during the debate. She barely invoked Biden's name. She was like running from the Biden, legacy. And there's some good stuff that Biden's done. This is the biggest part of his legacy, and it is a massive stain. But like, it is just so painful to me. I'm like, I think it is fear. I don't think it's decorum. I think she's fucking afraid. She is afraid of the Israeli lobby. She's afraid. And I also don't think though that if elected, this changes. This is a massive, there is massive amounts of pressure, and I'm glad. I don't know. For me, I think Palestine and Israel should be a litmus test for every Democrat moving forward. If this year has taught us nothing, it is that, because it is the key to not just our own safety and stability, but that of the Middle East and so many of our communities and loved ones. And this gets into World War III territory. Like, good, you should have an answer to, like, I don't know, even if it's a two-state solution, something I don't agree with or don't think is be possible, at least you have to say it. At least it should be like part of the discussion, And for sure, like Sarah, you and I, like coming from the anti-Iraq war, anti-Afghanistan war movements, like this anti-war movement really does stand on the shoulders of those and builds a true anti-war bloc that I hope can really wield power in the future.
Yeah. And, I will say that like Palestinian freedom, Palestinian organizing has always been present in U.S. anti-war movements, but now it is the anchor and the center. And people, Palestine has been marginalized for a really long time, including within social movements. So to see it take the center, I think that is really powerful. It's horrific that had to happen because something so horrifying is taking place. But
Yeah.
but I do think that there are like really big movement questions about like, okay, well, what does that mean for the future? How do we hold on to this? How do we build from this?
Yeah.
And a lot of people are grappling with that. You know, I have to be honest, like there are big strategic questions right now that I don't even feel prepared to answer. I think it's a hard moment, and there are big debates happening. You know, questions about like how to use the election as leverage for ending the onslaught. Is that possible? To what extent is that possible? If it's not possible, what do we do? I mean, it's just a really hard moment, and I just want to be open about the fact that I don't know that I necessarily have the answers, but there are a lot of smart people working really hard on this at a time of unbearably high stakes, like people hashing out these questions like while their literal family members are you know, under attack.
Yeah. Well, look, I'll leave it at this. I mean, here's my thought. I'm not an expert, but you know, I will say that, you know, potentially Kamala Harris jumping into the race and being the nominee is not as much of a leverage point, considering she may not need the particular communities, the Arab and Muslim communities in the swing states to win. She may not need them because of, you know, she's polling really well. She's up many points. However, if she loses, and we've all known this, it is because of low turnout among people of color, among Arab American voters, among people who have been demanding a change on this. And there's no one who relishes in a Kamala Harris loss, least of all me. But we know what it would be over. And, you know, again, it's a general election. She's tacking to the center. She's doing what every fucking Democrat in a general does and says, I don't really need the people of color, the youth vote, you know, I got Taylor Swift, whatever. And it's like, okay, I hope this works. I do hope this works. I do hope people, you know, I do think there should be mobilizing happening, but my God, like that's a huge, I don't know. It's also like our power has yet, Sarah, to grow to the point where we can, I think, leverage it in the way that we should. And it's a moral power. It's not, you know, crazy leftists, you know, holding out on their pet issue. You know, it's much bigger than that.
And you know, the one thing that's frustrating is that when Democrats lose, they always draw the wrong lessons. They're always like, "Oh, we should have tacked further right, and that's why we lost."
Exactly. We said abortion too much.
I was just thinking, you know, you were talking about like Harris's fear and sort of concern, but there's another possibility, which is she just genuinely believes it. You know, like at the last debate, one of the things I noticed is that she only really became animated and really seemed excited when she was talking about war. Or to put it differently, that was when she was at her most animated and like frankly seemed the most like you saw her convictions come through. And so, you know, I think that there's this like possibility that lawmakers are taking these positions because they have an ideological commitment. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't try to push them. Absolutely. Like we live in the US, it's our government sending the weapons. We absolutely need to push. And these same people will also, you know, that doesn't mean that they won't, you know, that there's no point in trying to get them to buckle to pressure. But unfortunately, you know, with Biden, it's absolutely the case. That he has an ideological commitment.
100%. What's going on, Frantifa? If you haven't already, subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that button. And also, you can become a patron and support the show every single week. Get access to bonus episodes and exclusive merchandise. Patreon.com/Bitchuation Room. Do it.